meeting for Dash. It's July 14th and we could get started. So I think where we left off last time, we had PR 137 that needed to be reviewed and approved. We closed on the white box, black box testing discussion. And I think, let me pull up the project here. I'm gonna share my screen. Behavioral model pro. Can you guys see okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
So great, thanks. And I think we had a couple of items to check back on today during this call, July 14th, that's today. Okay, and so I was wondering though, I wanted to open it up first. I know Bud had a question, and so I thought maybe, Bud, did you want to ask your question before we get started?
I could. There's actually several questions about the tables in the P4 code. We can leave it to the end. I'm not picky.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and then check back on these real quick. We had, Maureen, you want to go ahead and check back on the ones for the 14th? I'll go into the by owner view here. So I know we wanted to check back on number 7 here, connection tracking in the simulator. We're dependent on P4 community.
Yeah. This one is not dependent on P4 community anymore. However, there's still work to be done, but it is currently on hold due to resource allocation. So yeah, I cannot provide a new date until we resume this task, but we are not blocked anymore. We just need to get to it at some point.
Okay. And are you saying you have to do it yourself, or are you asking for like someone to help with it, or?
We have other person in my team doing that.
Oh, okay.
But he's busy with another thing, so yeah.
Okay, all right. So you're not asking for help from anyone here. Okay, that's helpful. Thanks. And then is Mario on the phone? It's hard to monitor both here. So.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Hey, Mario.
Yeah.
How's this one going?
Moving on, but not done yet.
Oh, you're moving on. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Awesome. Well, should I put it in drafting or in progress?
In progress.
In progress. Okay, great. Awesome. Check back next week then, see how it's going.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
And we don't have someone have some music going. That's helpful in the morning. I need to size down this window real quick. That's better. Okay. And yeah, I think that's all we needed to check back on. We've had conversations about size thrift.
I thought there was another PR.
There is, wasn't it number? Let me check it here. This one, the adding the tunnel table to the pipeline.
No.
No. Is it Mukesh's?
Let's tell you the VNet Direct route by Mukesh.
Yeah, it's right here. I've got it on the screen. Number 141. So do we have Mukesh on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Okay, let's talk about this one then.
Yeah, I saw in the behavioral model implementation, the VNet direct route is left empty. Can you please explain why did you do it this way?
Yeah, should I share my screen?
Are you trying to find the sharing button?
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
It's
asking for
up,
some
it's the up.
permissions.
Okay.
Careful, it is next to the leave button. So
Yeah.
Okay. Able to see my screen now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, this PR is about handling all these examples from the Sonic HLD, right? So there are four cases here for phase one. The VNet direct, the direct, and the drop. So we've added 4 cases here, three cases here. In the route VNet was already there. So we've added the direct and the drop. So, and within the VNet is where we have the VNet and VNet direct, both are handled here. So I'll first go to the direct and the drop, and then we can talk about the VNet and the VNet direct. So for the direct, so basically from the example, what direct means is that we don't do anything in the overlay. We just send it to the underlay for underlay routing. Right? The packet, incoming packet from the VM is decapped. The outer header is decapped, and the inner header is just routed in the underlay. So that's how I've handled the route direct. Basically, there's nothing to do here, but we just need an action here so that we can configure this from the GNMI, from the dash containers. And then the drop action is, yeah, that's pretty obvious. So we want to drop those packets matching those prefixes. So we've just set the drop to true. So that leaves the route VNet. So the route VNet, so what we have done is, so this handles, like we said here, it handles both these cases. So the first case is where we punt to the mapping table, the CA to PA mapping table. And the second case is where we punt to the mapping table plus, but we also have a IP override, meaning the lookup IP, the IP that needs to be looked up in the mapping table needs to come from this routing table. Whereas in the first case, we just use the IP directly from the packet, the best IP from the packet. So to handle both those cases, we have this flag now called use overlay IP, and we also specify an IP here in this routing entry. So if this is false, then it defaults to the route VNet case, and if this is true, then we specify an IP here, and it goes into the VNet direct case. So the other way of doing this would be to create a separate action called route VNet direct and not use a flag. So we could do that also. Currently, when I tried that, I hit one limitation, which is that this dest VNet VNI would be a parameter that would be shared by both those actions, right? So the SAI API generation was ending up generating 2 different attributes with the same name, and that was getting a compilation error. We can fix that. But I was wondering whether we should create a separate action for that or just leave it like this here.
I believe it's better to create a separate action because this way you will need to have another Boolean attribute, which is, I'd rather avoid that.
Okay. Yeah, we can fix that. So I'll work on also fixing the SAI API generation tool to just not create the duplicate attribute. So once I do that, I can create a separate action, and then I'll get rid of this Boolean bit here. And so the route VNet direct will have the dest VNet VNI, the overlay NH IP, and so these two, right? It won't have this flag, and it will directly override the lookup. So what we have done here is that we created a new meta variable called lookup dest IP, and that's what we are going to look up in the mapping table. Instead of the one from the packet, we're going to use this lookup dest IP. So by default, we copy the IP from the packet into this lookup. And then if this is set, then we override that lookup with the one coming from the routing table.
So can I make a comment?
Yeah.
So there is obviously one of them, I mean, between the two choices, one of them is more memory efficient, right? So essentially you'll be adding a bit to the whole of the routing table, whatever is the size, right? Could go into millions in cases, right? So adding actions also adds because you need to select a specific action. So it might depend, it does depend on, how many actions you have and if it is a two to the power and whatnot. But at least there is more possibility of optimization, right? And whereas if you just add extra parameters to actions, they all become the so-called associated data, and then the maximum of any one of the parameters of the actions is the width of the memory you need to keep. So we can do some math, and clearly you will have one that's more memory optimal. So I think writing code for that is a good way.
I tend to disagree with that because this is behavioral model. We are not working on optimizing the memory usage. We're working on the clearest definition of the behavior. This is not supposed to be interpreted for implementation one-to-one.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that we don't need to exclude that. I agree with you that we don't need to focus on exclusively memory, but somebody may use it as a real thing also. So you don't need to preclude that. And you don't have.
Any optimization can go underneath. What we are exposing to the real implementations are API. An API can be interpreted in many ways as long as they follow this behavior.
Yeah, I think the API part is important because this is going to translate into side table manipulations ultimately, regardless of the implementation. So we have to be really conscious of the API that results from all these choices, right?
Yeah, as long as the API lends itself to optimization in the underlying layer, right?
Yeah, so I think I have only one comment to really have two actions over here. It maps very well to GNMI defined for the controller.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, because even in the GNMI documentation, I thought I saw, so in the VNet to VNet, in the other document here, I thought I saw cases where even the VNet direct was called VNet action. If you see here, the routing table action type is VNet. Then it has an overlay IP, but the type is VNet. So I don't know, maybe this is wrong here. It should be VNet direct. Because in this, there are two examples here in this document.
Right, yeah, sorry, what I meant is not GNMI, the layer in between the application DB schema. You have two different kinds of routes there.
Correct, yeah. So now what I meant is from the GNMI itself, the difference between this VNet and VNet direct, just to be clear. So the HLD document says that the VNet means go to mapping without overlay IP, and VNet direct, at least the example says that there will be an overlay IP. Whereas here in this document, the VNet to VNet document, this is not yet there in the master, but I saw a pull request with this, and we did refer to it in one of the older meetings, I guess. So So here here in this document, the VNet action has both. Does both going to mapping without the overlay IP and so if you see top here, this doesn't have a overlay IP. And here you have a VNet action, but it does have overlay IP. Both are called, the action is the same. The action is VNet. Maybe, I don't know if this is a typo here.
It's
Probably.
very possible that's something we were working on and we're going to get feedback on. Yeah.
Okay. So if that is the case, so then yeah, so the second action, the VNet direct action that we'll be creating, that won't have this Boolean. So which means that VNet direct always means overlay IP will be provided. It's not optional. We'll go with that assumption. So I'll make those changes and repush the.
Yeah. I think we're all quiet because we're
So-
thinking. So yeah.
No, everything
Okay.
else looks good.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree
So the
with
only
all.
other change I made was the make file. I just added the dependency for all the P4s. Whenever we make a change in the P4, it was not building the JSON. Then the other change was like you just added the drop action at the end of the pipeline to just to make sure that when we say drop, it basically drops here. These are minor stuff.
Yeah, I saw your change on the make file dependencies. That I had something like that added in another pending PR. So we both found the same thing.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
good.
So maybe you can have it removed from here because this one is not the infrastructure. This is behavioral model. Let's maybe keep infrastructure changes separate.
Sure, yeah. If it's coming in later, then that's. I thought, yeah. So whoever changes will immediately start seeing this, whichever PR goes first.
Yeah, and by the way, thanks for filing the issues. Both Mukesh and BJ filed some issues that we talked about, verbally yesterday. It's good to track those. So thanks.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and make a comment to the PR, just what we just talked about. I was just taking notes while we were talking, if that's okay. And then,
I guess no need. I will leave it myself.
oh, I was doing a lot of typing. Okay, I'll take it out. All right, great. And then, Mukesh, if you want to get with me about let's do it over email. The piece you believe is wrong in the document, I can make changes.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I'll
All
let
right.
you know.
All right.
Can we talk for a minute about something that came up in this discussion about how the SCI API is generated from the P4 code, and there's a lot of implications in terms of generating the official -SCI API, how the P4 code is written. We probably need to outline some design rules or guidelines for that, because someone could make something that runs fine in their development environment, and they make some innocuous choices on the table implementation and don't realize the impact, let's say, on the site API that's going to affect everything. So do we need to have a talk about that at some point and lay down some guidelines? Because not everyone appreciates the hidden implications of things. I certainly don't know all the implications.
On one hand, yeah, but on the other hand, don't we have CI/CD for it? At least to not break anything.
No, it's not whether or not it's broken. It's the choice, the implementation choice that someone makes is going to affect the SCI API that's going to trickle all the way up to the Sonic integration, right? So we have to design the table so that the resulting API is what we want. I'm not worried about the breaking. That's like follows, but how we define things has a lot of subtle implications, right?
Yeah, there are rules that can be defined. That's true.
Not everyone understands SCI best practices, let's say, and I certainly don't have a grasp of all the implications, hidden or otherwise. So if someone defines a P4 table that runs great in their simulation and works and they write tests, but then someone else says, oh gosh, that's not a very ideal way to implement the SCI interface that comes out of that. Can we do it a different way? We probably ought to figure out what some of those rules are, if there are any.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think I can outline some basic ones. there is an advanced section with regards to ACLs, but that was basically just the choice of implementation, so it's rather an exception. Yeah, probably we can do something like that. And there is future work as well. Like for instance, it's not very clear how to write P4 program in a way that it will properly generate APIs for counters, for instance. It's not yet clear to me, but I think definitely we can do stuff like describe what goes into those attributes, how the names of keys and action parameters affect them and actions themselves. So yeah, can describe those rules.
So
yeah, that is great. That is great, guys. I think this is, thanks, Chris, for bringing this one up, because as we just reviewed this PR, that was pretty evident that somebody made a mistake, but not made a mistake, but what they chose really resulted in some sort of like a compilation failure, right? So I think as we define the rules, one thing will be important is how are we going to enforce them as part of the CI/CD. That should also be, besides just basically somebody pointing it out, let's make this one as part of an automatic process of how we enforce it, right?
Yeah, so I see two action items here. One is start creating a set of rules, design rules, or principles. And even if it starts out as a README with quick bullets to get the most important ones that are right on top of mind, because we don't want to make this having to write a novel and then never gets written, because, so let's at least jot down the most important ones. And then the second action item would be create some tooling to do some style checking or something, just like, when you do Psi metadata generation, there's just tons of checks that are done. Like, did someone change the value of an enum from the last revision of Psi, et cetera? There's all these scripts in there that do that. We can possibly do a similar thing for the P4. Make sure that, the P4 info doesn't have certain things in it that would be unfortunate for the Psi generation, for example. Mari, do you have any idea of how that might be done?
Well, if it comes to like consistency across different versions of Psi, there is, I believe, as long as Dash API is still in the experimental, we have a waiver on that. So we don't need to keep the order. Everything else, like style checks and all that, it is enforced by the API generation itself. So I don't believe there is a way to define some kind of name of the key or parameter that will result in invalid name in Psi, except for those cases like what was found with this PR, where the same parameter is found in more than one action. But that's where we need to actually do improvements inside API generation, not to write a P4 program in a different way. And that's why I'm insisting on doing it the right way to actually change the API generation, make it smarter. Generally, what I'm trying to do is to not need to think about how you write your P4 program that it will affect Psi API, because people don't think about how they write a program and how the P4 runtime APIs will look like. It's just a different look and feel. But if we find something like that, usually it will be a signal that we need to improve Psi API generation, not to write the P4 program in a different way. And that's why I'm insisting on that. We don't need to make workarounds in P4. We need to define two different actions, no additional Booleans, nothing like that. And just fix the API generation. I think that's the right place to do that.
You don't think the P4 code should just have a validator after it's compiled?
Not really, no.
Okay. but we agree that we need something to catch things that, discourage practices that don't fit our conventions of some sort.
Yeah, if we will find a real example of such a thing. For now, what I saw it was that SAI API generator is not working as expected.
Okay. Good discussion.
Anyone else before we move on to Bud? Okay, let's do it.
Right. Hey, Christina. Yeah, so I had a few questions about some of the small tables that are looked up at the start of the P4 processing. Let me try to share my screen.
Yeah.
Right, can folks see this?
Yeah.
All right, so I had some questions on the VIP table, the Ethernet address map, and the PA validation table. Let me just go through these one at a time. So the VIP table, so my first question is, so I think I know what this is for. It's to ensure that the destination IP address on the outer header matches one of the VIPs that we advertised. So my first question is, what is the scale of this table? Is it just those two IP addresses?
Roughly, yeah. Like for now, I think the common use case will be one IPv4, one IPv6.
Okay. 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 So I just actually, I'm looking at this now. There's only an IPv4 address in the table as a key.
Oh yeah, right. SAI API generates like the IP address that you can pick from. It's a bug, should support, as we have in other places, a Boolean flag that indicates if it's v4 or v6, basically the family.
Okay.
Needs to be improved, but that's the meaning.
Okay, sure. Okay, my second question is that I noticed here after the table apply is invoked, we check to see if the packet was flagged to be dropped, and the function returns with a control returns immediately. And there are other times where a packet is marked to be dropped and we don't do this. And I don't know if this is just sort of an accidental inconsistency or if there's some rules here.
It's a bug because this behavioral model wasn't tested thoroughly, especially for the cases for the negative cases where you need to drop a packet for some reason.
Okay.
And you'll find stuff like that. When we will have negative test cases that want to ensure that with this specific field, meaning that something is not really done properly, like for instance, we don't have this, as you mentioned, VIP programmed, or maybe, I don't know, ENI programmed for this MAC address, packet should be dropped. We don't have these negative use cases, so you will find these inconsistencies still then. Probably there will be like a major task of revamping all of the drop logic in the pipeline.
Okay. Okay. And the last question on the VIP table was, should the deny action be marked as default only? So I think this means in P4 that you can't actually program table entry with deny. It's like a miss is a deny.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool.
There is like, yeah, here it's interesting because I really would want to have, as you said, only accept action and deny is default only. However, there is an implication on the SAI API because what we have in here is that this entry will generate like an empty attribute list, which SAI doesn't like if we don't have any parameters to choose from, and having only one action results in an empty attribute list. So there is like more to that needs to be solved. How we properly model that with SAI APIs, maybe this would be the object where the attribute is the IP address, because right now it's an entry. And if you look at this entry in SAI API, there is entry itself that has the IP value. And then attribute list allows you to choose from accept or deny action. If we would say that deny is default only, then there's only accept, which is only one, then this attribute is redundant. We are left with the empty list, which is a little bit ugly. Like both ways is ugly, so I'm trying to think how these kind of let's say almost atomic checks need to be properly expressed in SAI as well.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's
there
fine.
the,
I mean, so, but
default-
logically, we won't really program an entry that says deny.
Yeah.
It'll just be a misdeny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
All right,
One
cool.
question there. So the default only tag is not today honored by the SAI, the SAI tool.
Right.
So
That's
even
what
if you
I
mark it
was.
default only, it doesn't remove. I mean, the SAI API still has that deny, even if you mark it default only.
Yeah, because I cannot leave it empty, otherwise SAI won't compile. I still need to leave that choice.
No, it's not just that. Even if you want to remove it from the SAI, let's say some other case, right, where we have 3 actions or more than one action, you still can't leave it because the JSON tag doesn't have the default only anywhere expressed, right?
Oh, you're saying the P4 runtime file doesn't have this information?
Yeah, the default only tag is not
Maybe.
it's not coming into the JSON file. So I don't know if how can we leave it out of the SAI?
Yeah, right. I don't have an answer right now. That's something for the future improvements.
Okay, so the next table I had a question on is the ether address map table. And I think you've addressed this with what you said before about negative testing. So we look up the MAC address and determine the ENI from it.
Yeah,
Down
if we have
here,
a miss, we should
there's no
drop.
mischeck. Yeah.
That's for sure. We just don't do it in a lot of places properly.
Okay. Okay, and the last table is the PA table, the PA, sorry, validation table. And this one, I wasn't, I understand the idea of like a validation, but I was not really clear on how this table would be used. So it sounds like, and this is an inbound table, inbound only table. So
Yeah.
it sounds like it's used to say that, hey, these packets from these source addresses, source IP addresses are allowed to send packets to this ENI. And it seems like I'm not, I have to admit, I'm not super familiar with the whole, like the way data centers are constructed and everything, but that seems like possibly a large number of entries in this table if you have to enumerate every valid possible source. So I wasn't sure if that was the purpose of the table or if it was really trying to.
Yeah. So the scale is equal to the scale of CA to PA mapping. Basically, it's a two-way. Let's say it's two-way communication. You have the outbound where you map from CA to PA. So you're saying if I'm sending a packet to, if I was programmed to be able to communicate with that other ENI, meaning I have an entry in CA to PA table, then I should be able to accept packets from them as well. So what happens in reality is that controller only programs the mapping table, and inbound validation table is programmed as a result of it, as a side effect. Basically, I'm saying that I want to go to that PA, so I need to be able to receive from it as well.
Okay.
And the scale is on par. So if it's like 10 million on DPU in one direction, it will be 10 million in the opposite direction on the PA validation.
Okay. All right, great. That explains a lot. Thanks.
I have the same question as well, but how do we, how is this table going to get populated? So from each, so just trying to see how the GNMI model data would be converted to this, right?
Yeah, so as I said, GNMI or Sonic schema exposes CA to PA mapping table, right? We have a mapping table.
Mm-hmm.
And
so for
each,
every ENI and CA combination, we would be having an entry here.
Yeah, it's like it has to be done automatically by Sonic software, by your agent.
So is this,
It will receive only, yeah.
Is this going to be like an orchestration function where one entry gets expanded into two?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not exactly a one-to-one mapping of the app DB.
And that's why we have the orchestration agent, because it's not one-to-one map.
So just to
go ahead.
So just to clarify, so whenever the whenever we provision a CA to PA entry via GNMI, the ARC agent should loop through every ENI in the system and then or every ENI in that particular VNet and create an entry here for each of those CA entries. And whenever an ENI gets created, we have to loop through all the CA to PA entries and create entry here. Is that?
No, that's too much. The CA to PA mapping entry already has ENI as a key. So we know for which ENI we need to program that. We don't need to do for every ENI.
CA to PA has VNI as key, right? Not ENI.
VNI. Oh, okay. So it should be the same thing in here. It's for VNet. Should
okay,
be.
So the ENI is not a key here. Should not be a key here, right? Should be just a VNI.
Maybe that's true. Yeah, could be a bug as well.
Okay, I think that's the source of the confusion for even for. Yeah, I think So if it's VNI comma source, then it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I don't remember. If CA to PA has VNI, yeah, it has to be the same here.
Okay, that ties into my last question about the keys to this table, because in the P4 code, the ENI ID is not determined at the time the table lookup happens. So I didn't know if that there was something funky with the table keys, or if the lookup needed to be moved.
Yeah,
but it sounds like maybe the ENI ID shouldn't be one of the keys then.
Right, looks like a bug.
Okay.
So
all right, those are all my questions.
Does somebody fix the bug, or do we do it later? Sorry, I'm not a software developer.
Well, I would even change the question a little bit, saying we've identified at least 3 or 4 or 5 loose ends in the P4 code that are acknowledged, but we're not tracking them. We're just keeping them in mind. Do we want to transition to where we make a list or file issues? Because pretty soon we'll have 20 things keeping track of in our minds and not written. What do you think, Marian? Are we at that crossover point, or do we want to do a bunch of house cleaning and then start a fresh list?
Yeah, I think issues have to be opened. I think one major can be opened, like to do proper. Well, I'm not sure. Do we need to have an issue per table that doesn't do drop properly on miss? That's one thing. Yeah, also about the PA validation, that's another one. What else do we have?
Well, these key lookups, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
only
that's what I'm
those two,
talking
right?
about.
Yeah, those two are the ones that came out. I guess you can create one for the drop and one for the PA validation.
If you want, I can open issues and try to open as few as possible.
Yeah, you can put
keeping
checklist.
the context of the stuff inside each issue similar.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Michael Miele documented how to make checklists inside issues, so you don't have to have an issue per item. You can just have an issue like handle drop cases. Then you put a little square bracket with an X in it, and it populates like a checklist item in the issue, and you can track them like that way. It's in the GitHub rules document, so it's a handy way of not blowing up the issues list.
I can
So
I can try
I-
and find that for you, Bud, and send it to you in email
Sure.
if you want, or you can try and find it.
I mean,
I'll
I
just
think
look
I
it
could.
up. I'll just look it up here. It's
Oh, thanks.
yeah. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking. I mean, I have a list of to-dos in the P4 code as well, but in my mind, and pretty soon, you know, we're all going to have a little mental list. We may as well start getting it in writing.
Okay. Do you see that in the chat window, Bud?
Let me see. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Michael.
I had one question about the drop as well, one follow-up question. So when there is a drop, should we drop it immediate? I mean, should we do that return immediately, or should we wait until go to the end of the pipeline and then drop? Because there is a ENI meter with a drop, right? So what's the correct way of handling the drops?
Yeah, probably that ties into another question of how do we properly do statistics, and this is still open. So maybe if we can do all the needed statistics in place and we don't need to go to the end of the pipeline, if we cannot do that, we need to still gather all information at the end. Probably we do. I also don't know which way is the best to go.
Should we carry
Okay.
like a drop bit in the meta field and then yeah, count it somewhere and then finally drop it?
Yeah, and we need a mark to drop instruction at the end of that. If the metadata is marked drop, that's not in the code either.
So that's in my PR has that to have the mark to drop, but yeah, we have scenarios where it's dropped even before it's returned before. So maybe we should handle it in a common way by just setting the bit and letting it fall to the end of the pipeline, then get dropped there. But then I don't know what would happen if, say, for example, this VIP case where we are saying it's already a wrong VIP, but we still allow all the table lookups and then drop it then. Is that an acceptable behavior?
Yeah, so again, there should be a common way. I'm not sure at this point which one is it.
Sure. Yeah. Just to discuss. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So number 142 came in, Marian, just asking for a review here yesterday. This is the tunnel table in the pipeline. So FYI, did you want to talk about this, Vijay?
Hey, sure. Yeah. Yeah, if we can quickly go over it. Yeah. Can I share my screen?
Of course. It's the up arrow button
Yeah.
in the white box, yeah.
Yeah, I'm having some issue with that, but that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to just go over these changes. So basically, this PR, what it's trying to propose is segregating all the tunnel attributes into the tunnel table, which is part of the pipeline. Because right now, tunnel attributes are driven from multiple tables in the pipeline. So the idea is to bring all the different tunnel related attributes into a single tunnel table and drive tunnel IDs from different tables in the pipeline, like the route and then the CA to PA mapping and then the ENI, which are all driving a tunnel table, which comes to a single point of indirection, which is the tunnel table where all the tunnel attributes are segregated. So this allows us to kind of manage the tunnel programming more easily, because if any only tunnel related attributes can go just in this tunnel table, for example, NCAP type, and then the depot or the outer headers can all go in the tunnel table. And there's only a single touch point from the API point of view if any tunnel attribute changes. So this is just a high level overview of the change. So just wanted to kind of get thoughts from everyone on if this kind of syncs with what we want to do.
So what are the attributes of the tunnel table?
Yeah, we can go into the PR. So right now if you can just scroll it down a bit. So one thing is currently there is we've added like two NCAP types, VXLAN and NVGRE, although the only VXLAN is being driven from the tunnel table right now. And the tunnel table itself has the attributes which are the underlay DMAC and underlay DIP, and then the NCAP type.
Yeah, but those are not really. So underlay dip, okay. Let's stick to underlay dip. So NCAP type, you mean VXLAN versus NVGRE?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Underlay, but there are other things. There is VNI or GRE key, whatever one, depending on the tunnel type.
Right. So, yeah, I think the VNI is something that we have currently, we are not yet moving it into the tunnel table. That is something that we are leaving it as is, but that is one potential option that we can move into the tunnel table. The GRE keys itself, that is something right now, if you see the way the only VXLAN is handled, so the GRE keys is not something that is part of the tunnel attributes, but that is something that we can add as well if we need to do an NCAP type GRE.
I'm not sure if it will work for every. So the problem with this is that that's not really how the encapsulation for all of the VNet routes is happening right now, because this information is taken from different places and you don't necessarily have them all at once. If it was the case that you can actually build the whole tunnel all at once, but what happens in reality is that some of the values are determined when there is a routing lookup, and some other values are determined when there is a CA to PA lookup. So still there is some indirection there. So I'm afraid of grouping all of them into one tunnel ID because I may not have all of them together and I need to carry this tunnel ID over somehow.
Right.
I
So if you
guess
look at the
so the underlay dip, underlay DMAC, and the encap type ideally belong in one place. So they all should either come from CA to PA or the route. They ideally come from one place in the pipeline. Usually.
Underlay DMAC
The
is a different
VNI
story. It shouldn't be part of the tunnel, actually. It should be part of the underlay, which is not yet complete. But underlay dip and VNI
encap
are
type.
not.
So the VNI, I think that's why VNI is left out of this one, because VNI can come from the because there could be multiple routing entries or CA to P entries sharing the same tunnel. So the VNI is left outside. This has only the actual underlay tunnel specific properties like the IP and the type. Like you said, the MAC is probably going to come from the underlay, so we can leave that out as well.
Yeah, so what's the use of this table really? We are just collapsing two values into one, or actually assuming we have only one tunnel really used on one DPU, we're just switching underlay IP for a tunnel ID, so that underlay IP will be determined later.
Yeah, I think the idea is to just add a level of indirection because you don't want to go and touch multiple entries if some tunnel property changes. And this is also a place where you can stash any tunnel related attributes in a single table. So for example, something like an admin state on a tunnel can go into this place rather than go and touch multiple entries in the
but there is no,
right? So,
right. But probably here I will go back to what Chris mentioned. What are the rules for? Probably this is the case where we need some guidelines for why we do implementation this way and not the other, is because there is no tunnel and there is no tunnel admin state. There is no notion of the tunnel in Sonic schema, and we are trying to be close to Sonic schema. So if there is nothing like that, it means that Sonic will need to now keep some cache of the tunnels and keep all those indirections. And every time we want to just program a new mapping entry, probably what Sonic will need to do is to look up tunnel ID, put the tunnel ID in the right place, or create a new one, which is additional work on the org agent, which doesn't really need to be there.
Right. Yeah, I agree. This adds one level of SAI API and additional SAI tunnel API. But the question is, does it? The question is, does it make life easier from managing tunnels point of view? Rather than, because even for the org agent, there are multiple touch points. If some tunnel attribute changes, like an encap type or even a dip changes, having to touch multiple entries or program call multiple SAI APIs versus calling a single API, right? So that was the idea behind this. But yeah, it does add another SAI API to the behavioral model. And so that's the question, I guess, in terms of whether this makes sense to add this indirection or it does add some work to the org agent.
Also today, SAI is the concept of a tunnel is there in the SAI API, and the even Sonic org agent does do configure tunnels and all that. This is not a new concept. So this is a pretty well-known concept of creating tunnels, and it's the responsibility of org agent to manage tunnels and so on.
So why aren't we using the SAI API for the tunnel that we have today?
In the sense for the dash,
that's in the underlay tunnel,
right.
you mean?
Yeah, probably the tunnel that Sai has today, it actually behaves slightly different. That's my point. The underlay tunnel is what you are trying to model in here. You have a tunnel ID, and from there you derive attributes. And here, again, we don't derive, and actually, if you look at the tunnel, there are Sai tunnel, the one that we have today. It has stuff like VNI mappings, other things, which we cannot bring in here. So the question is, how do we derive in Dash all of these attributes? And it's not done in one place. So that's why I believe it will be less beneficial to have the tunnel ID, because we are trying to impose this kind of entity that doesn't really exist. We are taking different values from different places, from the routing table, from the CA to PA table, maybe from other places as well, and having them collapsed into one doesn't really make sense. And if we will reduce this tunnel table to just basically what it is today, I believe underlay DMAC shouldn't be there. Underlay DMAC has nothing to do with the tunnel. But underlay IP is the only thing that we can put there, and I don't see a reason to have this indirection.
Yeah, I think underlay IP and type, those are, yeah, underlay DMAC can definitely be removed from here because it's strictly not a tunnel property. So underlay dip right now is pretty much the only thing, and of course the type of the tunnel.
Yeah, so we're just switching one for another.
So, I mean, just trying to understand in terms of just the switch Sai API tunnel, we don't see how this maps to the Dash tunnel, right? Because Dash itself needs the concept of the Dash pipeline, needs a concept of the tunnel, right? So,
yeah, that's my point.
I guess what you're saying is.
I think it doesn't need that. It's a different concept.
Okay. So I guess what you're saying is there is no benefit to adding an indirection at the Dash level and leave the orchestrator to go and program multiple entries or call multiple Sai APIs and leave the work to the implementation layer.
Yeah, actually, there will be less Sai API calls if we keep them separate, because that's how Sonic schema looks like.
Yeah. Okay.
So is that one of the goals, like keeping it as close to the GNMI as possible?
Oh yeah,
Like
definitely.
reducing. Okay.
Everything that we
Yeah,
cannot make like the GNMI schema, that's why we have the orc agent. As I mentioned before, like one CA to PA mapping results in 2 entries in Sai, because we need to program the opposite direction for PA validation. But other than that, if there is a choice to have it exactly like what controller expects, then why not?
Okay. So I think, yeah, I guess fundamentally it boils down to that. If we are having that as a thumb rule and we don't want to introduce any new indirections to make the behavioral models API life easier, then what we are saying is we want to avoid doing such things in the behavior model to keep it as close to the GNMI model as possible. While it might not seem efficient from a pipeline point of view, but because it maps to the GNMI model, it makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Sounds good. I think, yeah, we just wanted to understand, like, what is just the general motivations. But I guess now we have a more clear picture of the general motivation that we want to keep the SAI APIs as close to GNMI APIs as possible, right? And anything else is not encouraged.
Yeah, that's definitely a goal. It will make life of Sonic easier, less bugs.
Okay. Okay.
Less things.
So
to
one
keep
other thing
track
is
of.
right.
I'm sorry, but
So
I am 3 minutes overdue for another call. So if it does not consider me, please continue, but I will need to drop. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Do you want, and with Marian leaving, do you want to save your question for next time or try to cover it in email?
no, I think that's fine. I can, yeah, shoot an email to him if required. Otherwise, we're good.
Okay, okay. So, and Bud, did you want to file those two items on the P4, or did you want me to do it, or?
I can do it.
Okay, all right. Yeah, anything, and then action items for next time would be to, I guess, maybe cover any other code in the pipeline and maybe bug coverage. All right, I'll stop the recording and post it.
Hello?
Yeah?
Hello?